On the night of July 25, 2026, a van drove into a crowd of pedestrians inside Berlin's Tiergarten Park, a few hundred meters from the closing celebrations of Christopher Street Day, Germany's largest pride event. The driver got out and fled on foot before he could be stopped. One woman died, a 65-year-old Polish woman. 29 others were hurt, some critically. German police found the suspect the next day, hiding in an allotment garden complex in Spandau. He was 21, born in Germany. His name was Abdul Ballout. When police moved in, he charged at them with a blade. They shot him dead. Germany's government called it a terror attack within hours. Now here is the part that is making people angry. Ballout was not a stranger to the German state. He was not someone who slipped through the cracks. German intelligence had already flagged him as a Gefährder, their official term for a person likely to commit serious politically motivated violence. A government analysis tool had rated him a high-risk individual. Authorities were already conducting technical surveillance on him. None of it stopped him. In 2025, Ballout traveled to Lebanon trying to join the Islamic State. He was arrested there and jailed for 3 months on charges linked to IS membership. When he came back to Germany, police detained him right away. In May 2026, a German juvenile court convicted him of preparing a serious act of violence against the state. His sentence, 1 year and 10 months. Suspended. Not a single day in prison. Why suspended? The judges gave him credit for time already spent in custody in Lebanon and in pretrial detention in Germany. They also noted he had confessed and claimed he had distanced himself from IS. Under German youth sentencing law, a confession carries heavy weight as a sign of remorse. Prosecutors were furious. They immediately appealed, asking for a real prison sentence instead. But under German law, an appeal does not stop a release. Ballout walked out of Plötzensee Juvenile Detention Center in May 2026, free, while his appeal was still pending. 2 months later, he killed someone. Germany's Interior Minister, Alexander Dobrindt, said it plainly afterward. Technical surveillance was already happening. It simply was not enough. This was not a case of nobody watching. It was a case of the watching not being backed by the power to actually stop him. The public reaction was furious and fast. The government responded, though it is worth being precise about what has actually happened so far versus what has only been proposed. Dobrindt announced plans, not yet passed into law, to expand the use of electronic ankle monitors for people classified as security risks, and to introduce new preventive detention powers so authorities can hold dangerous individuals before they act, not just after. He has not yet said when a bill will be introduced. He also called for reforming Germany's juvenile justice system. Under current law, offenders can be tried as juveniles for crimes committed up to age 20, a rule Dobrindt says makes no sense when the person in question is a documented security threat. His words, applying juvenile law to an adult security threat is unacceptable. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has also criticized the country's own security services over how Ballout's case was handled, though the specific legal reforms are still being worked out, not finalized. This is not Germany's first attempt to fight organized extremism through the law. It is the first time the state has had to face a much harder problem, not an organization it can raid and shut down overnight, but a single radicalized individual the system already knew about and still could not fully stop. To understand why Ballout's case is so different, look at what Germany has already done successfully against organized extremism. In July 2024, Germany's government, under then Interior Minister Nancy Faeser, banned the Islamic Center Hamburg, known as the IZH, along with every branch connected to it. The IZH had operated since 1953, founded by Iranian immigrants, running the well-known Imam Ali Mosque in Hamburg. For decades, it looked like an ordinary place of worship. German intelligence saw it differently since the 1990s. The government's official reasoning. The IZH acted as the direct representative of Iran's supreme leader inside Germany, spread the ideology of Iran's Islamic Revolution, supported Hezbollah, banned in Germany since 2020, and pushed what officials called aggressive antisemitism. The shutdown came in two stages. Police first raided 55 properties in November 2023, seizing evidence that, in the government's words, confirmed the group was operating secretly while presenting itself publicly as purely religious. 8 months later, roughly 670 police officers hit 53 properties across 8 German states in a single coordinated sweep. 4 mosques closed. Assets frozen. The entire organization dissolved in one stroke. The legal tool behind this is unusual and powerful. It combines Article 9 of Germany's Basic Law with the country's Association Act, together known as militant democracy. It was built after World War II specifically so no movement, whether neo-Nazi, hard left, or Islamist, could use Germany's own freedoms to destroy German democracy from the inside. That law works brilliantly against organizations. You can erase a group's legal existence with one signature, but you cannot erase one radicalized person's freedom of movement the same way. That requires changing sentencing law, monitoring law, and detention law. The exact reforms Germany is now scrambling to pass after Ballout slipped through every existing safeguard. Germany has faced terror attacks before. Mannheim, Solingen, the Magdeburg Christmas market. Every time the pattern was the same. Shock, a short burst of political debate, then back to normal within months. This time looks different. And the real reason has less to do with the attack itself, and more to do with German politics over the last 2 years. The AfD, Alternative for Germany, was founded in 2013 as a fringe protest party. By 2026, it has become the single most consistently leading party in national polling. Multiple pollsters, including GMS and INSA, have shown the AfD ahead of Chancellor Merz's own CDU for months, with the gap sometimes running several points and AfD support sitting in the mid to high 20s. As recently as around a year ago, the AfD was polling closer to 18%, roughly half the CDU's support at the time. That gap has now completely flipped. Berlin itself, a city governed by parties left of the CDU almost continuously since 2001, has become a genuine three-way contest for the first time since reunification, with the AfD now a serious contender for first place in the state's September 2026 election. Here is the uncomfortable part nobody in Berlin's political establishment wants to say out loud. Germany's willingness to take real, structural action against extremism has grown sharply at almost the exact moment the AfD became too big to ignore. There is one clear, documented moment that shows this pressure turning into real policy, and it happened more than a year before the Berlin attack. In January 2025, while Merz was still the opposition leader running for chancellor, he did something no mainstream German leader had done since the country's founding. He brought a tough migration bill to parliament, knowing it could only pass with AfD votes. And he let it happen anyway. The first version passed by just 3 votes, carried entirely by AfD support. It broke what German politicians call the firewall, the decades-old agreement that no mainstream party lets its own laws depend on the far right. Former Chancellor Angela Merkel, Merz's own predecessor as CDU leader, publicly rebuked him for it, calling the move wrong. A second, tougher version of the bill was voted down days later, 350 to 338, after mass protests outside Parliament. Merz insists he never formed an actual coalition with the AfD, and that remains true. But it barely matters. The AfD did not need a coalition deal to shape German policy. It only needed to be big enough and dangerous enough to the CDU's own survival that Merz had every incentive to start borrowing its positions on migration and security, just to hold onto his own voters. Every tightening that followed the ankle monitor proposals, the mosque shutdowns, the harder line on deportations, fits the same pattern. Germany's mainstream government did not suddenly discover new convictions on its own schedule. It responded to a political reality where the party it spent 10 years trying to sideline had grown too large to beat with arguments alone. It is worth being careful here, because it is tempting to draw the biggest possible conclusion. Let's stick to what the facts actually support. Germany has proven it can act decisively and legally against organized extremism when the political will exists. The IZH ban was real, thorough, and effective. That is not in question. What is also true, and less comfortable for Germany's political class, is that the timing of that will keeps lining up with electoral pressure. The IZH ban happened under a different governing coalition in 2024, before the AfD's current surge. The January 2025 immigration vote happened because Merz, facing a rising AfD ahead of an election, calculated that voters wanted to see it. The post-Ballout reforms are being proposed now, with the AfD leading nearly every national poll and within reach of winning its first-ever state government. None of this makes the security concerns fake. The IZH's ties to Iran and Hezbollah were real. Ballout's radicalization, his convictions, and the gap that let him remain free despite being a flagged security risk are all real. Closing that gap is a reasonable response, no matter what the polls say. But the polling does tell you something. Germany's mainstream parties are no longer setting security policy without one eye on the AfD. They are increasingly adopting the substance of what the AfD has argued for years, while still publicly insisting they will never work with the party itself. Germany just showed something the rest of the continent said for years was impossible. A cautious, careful, historically apologetic democracy can dismantle organized extremism through the law without throwing out the law to do it. It also showed something less comfortable for Brussels. That willingness did not come from a sudden change of heart. It came from pressure applied by a party the establishment spent over a decade trying to shut out, a party now positioned to become Germany's leading political force and potentially win its first state government before the end of 2026. The mosque bans and the new security proposals are the headline. The AfD's steady rise through every major poll in 2026 is the real story sitting underneath it. And that is exactly what the rest of Europe, watching similar movements grow in their own backyards, will be watching next.